Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you guys who are able to join us live today. We are recording this, so we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel. We have actually a really special treat today. Nick from U of O is here to talk to us about understanding your financial aid offer. And this is something we've actually never done before, but I got to work with Nick in the late summer, early fall, and absolutely just fell in love with him and his expertise in this area. And he's so knowledgeable. And I'm really excited that we can bring him back again to kind of walk through those financial aid offers, because I know for me personally, I get a lot of questions from students about it. And so I think this is going to really help clear some things up, but hearing it from an expert that can actually just share all the information and all the goodies in that for you, timelines and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Nick. And thank you so much for being here and meeting with our students. And we appreciate it so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Jessica, and good morning, everybody. So, as Jessica said, my name is Nick Dykes. I'm a financial aid counselor at the University of Oregon, which means that my job is basically to make this as easy as possible for students and families. And the information I'm going to talk about today is relevant whether you've applied to the University of Oregon or whether you've applied elsewhere or you're thinking about applying for a future year. It's all going to be relevant to you. I may use examples from the University of Oregon, but it's not to say, hey, this is the only way. And I'll point out how things might differ. I also really want to hear from you all. You know, don't be shy in unmuting yourself and saying, hey, I have a question, or typing in the chat if that's, whatever's most comfortable for you. Like I said, we've got plenty of time, and really I've got some slides, but I'm not here to be like, hey, this is all the information, you know, because I want to know what you want to know. That's the most important thing. Since I'm here live with you, or or if you're watching a recording live with your peers, here today. So first thing I want to do is just get a sense of, what grade level you are all in, and also whether you've received your financial aid offer. So if you could type in the chat, you know, what grade level are you right now? Have you received any financial aid offers from colleges you've attended or applied to, excuse me? And if you haven't applied, maybe just say, I haven't applied for any colleges yet. And just put that in the chat. Okay, Isaac, grade 12. The time for scholarship responses to be returned hasn't arrived. Yep. Riley, senior, all seniors. Okay. Jack's heard from a couple scholarships. Jaden hasn't gotten any information yet. Some people are still waiting. All right. It's a good number of responses. Thank you all. Okay, so that gives me a sense of kind of where you are in the process. Let's get started with the slides. And here's the overview of the presentation. We're going to talk about aid applications and kind of the overall financial aid process. Now, as you maybe have heard or are experiencing yourself, it can be kind of confusing. So I just want to give you kind of the general overview. Not going to get into a lot of details on the process, but just kind of help you to figure out, like, where are you, in that, have you done everything you need to do? What comes next? All of that good stuff. We'll talk about the details of financial aid offers, including some examples of different kinds of financial aid offers and what each section actually means. And kind of the bottom line, like, hey, can I afford to go to college? That's really the most important thing, right? We'll talk about additional grants and scholarships. That's a question that my office gets a lot at this time of year. People see their aid offer and they go, okay, but how can I use less loans? Or, how can I get a little bit more grants and scholarships, free money, so that I can make this as inexpensive as possible for me and my family? And then we'll talk about how to get help, which is super critical. Here I am today. I can provide some info to you in this short session, but really, there are lots of people like me out there at the colleges and universities you're interested in attending, who are the experts on the process at their school, because some things can differ from school to school. And especially if you're the first in your family to go to college, there is no shame in asking the people who are paid to answer your questions. And not only are paid to do so, but love to do so. Like this is my favorite part of my job, is talking with you all. So don't be shy. If you have a question, if you don't understand, that is completely normal. And we're going to do our best to demystify it and help you get to the next step. Okay. So aid applications, you may have heard of or submitted a FAFSA, a free application for federal student aid. If you have not done one and you're interested in going to college this fall, or really any time between fall and summer of next year, now is the time. In fact, at the University of Oregon, we had a priority filing deadline of March 1st. And what that means is that students who submit by March 1st are considered for all types of financial aid. If they've submitted after March 1st, they can still get some types of financial aid, but they won't be considered for all of it, because some types of financial aid are limited, and we have to kind of give it to the students who were proactive. So that's what you might see in terms of a priority filing deadline. Now, in terms of a final deadline, I would say it's when your first bill is due and you need that financial aid to pay that bill. So do your FAFSA as soon as possible if you haven't done it already. I also get questions about whether I should submit a FAFSA or not. Let's say your family does not have very high financial need and you don't think you're going to get a grant or something like that based on your financial need. Lots of reasons to apply anyway. There's some scholarships where financial need is one component, but then they're also looking at your grades or your race and ethnicity, or like a number of things. And if you don't do a FAFSA, you can't be considered. There's also federal loans, which we're going to talk about, which are offered to everyone, and they're the best loans you can get. So if you need a loan to help you pay for college, then you should do the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is the main application for need-based aid, and it's for citizens and eligible non-citizens, which is a category that basically includes permanent residents and refugees. We're going to talk about the alternative if you are not an eligible non-citizen. And you can do that at FAFSA.gov. So the alternative to the FAFSA for Oregon residents who are in the DACA program or don't have documents, no social security number, you're going to want to do the ORSA, which is the Oregon Student Aid Application. Again, the purpose is to determine your financial need. You won't be eligible for federal aid, but you can still be considered for aid from the state of Oregon and from schools in Oregon. So OregonStudentAid.gov is the place to go if you are undocumented. Now, if you are a citizen or a permanent resident, you've got a social security number, but your parent does not, you should do the FAFSA. You are eligible for federal aid. Okay, and then just a quick overview of the process. So the FAFSA and the ORSA became available in October of last year. We're in this time period now where most schools are reviewing that FAFSA, and if you've been admitted, they're probably going to let you know if there's any requirements you need to complete, which is like steps to verify the information you put on your FAFSA. And they might not be able to create an aid offer for you, or it might not be final until you've done those additional steps. So super important to look for communications from the schools you've applied to, especially email. A lot comes by email, to let you know if you have any requirements to complete. And if there is a portal like where all of your student records are for that school, that's probably where the requirements are listed as well. We have an up-to-date list of your requirements in our portal, which is called DuckWeb. And then around March, well, University of Oregon creates aid offers around March. I've heard from some of you that you had aid offers already. So I would say we're a little bit on the later side. So you should definitely get most of your aid offers by the end of March. And most schools ask for your commitment, decision about whether you're going to attend there or somewhere else by May 1st. So that's our recommended decision date. You basically have a month to look at your aid offer and determine whether that's, taking into account all of the great things about each college or university, all the drawbacks, then looking at what does it actually cost, you and your family can make an informed decision about whether this is a good place for you to make an investment in your future. And then between March and September, at the University of Oregon, you can accept or decline that aid offer. So let's say that you're offered some loans and you're not sure whether you need them yet. You don't need to accept them right away. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be available to you to accept, but you're going to want to do that right, like at least before your bill is due, which is probably going to be in October at the University of Oregon. So between March and September, you really want to figure out, where am I going and what aid do I need? Okay, I'm going to pause there. My screen is full with the presentation, so I'm going to come back to see you all. And I see we've got a question from Jack. So what if we filed the FAFSA earlier in the year, but made corrections to it regarding school choices? Does that bump it to the later deadline? So when you add FAFSAs on, or when you add schools on the FAFSA, it's like putting a paper application in the mail, in the sense that, like, every time you click submit and a school is listed, they're going to get that update. If you added a school later on, then they're not going to get it until the date that you add them as a recipient. Jack, to ask you a little bit more about your question, are you worried that you added a school as a recipient after their FAFSA deadline? I'll give you a little.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, I was just doing a bunch of scholarships for a private school in Arizona, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and I only then realized that I hadn't filed FAFSA for the school until like 3 days ago. I think so. They have a rolling deadline at that school, so I think it'll probably be okay in that regard, but I'm not too sure.
Okay. Yeah, I recommend you check with them. If they've got rolling admissions, they may well have a whole different FAFSA schedule as well. At the University of Oregon, we're very traditional student focused, where most students are first-time freshmen coming in the fall. Certainly we have transfer students as well, and students that start throughout the year, but the bulk of our students start in the fall. And so our calendar is geared around that, where we want to be able to have your FAFSA by March 1st, make you an aid offer in March, have your admissions decision by May, you enroll in September. And at these other schools, if they have rolling admissions where really people are starting all the time, they might be a little bit more lenient on their FAFSA deadline. So I would recommend you check with them. Any other questions about things I've covered so far? All right. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, understanding your financial aid offer. All right. Here is a page of a ton of information that you might not even be able to view on your screen because it's so tiny and there's so much. This is a sample college financing plan. And on the next couple of slides, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to, enlarge each of the sections so that you can actually see what it says, and we can kind of go line by line and say, what does this actually mean? So every college and university in the United States is required to offer this to you, this format of your financial aid offer information. Again, it's called a college financing plan. Now, when you get your aid offer, this might not be what you see at first. For example, the University of Oregon emails our own aid offer letter, and it looks like this. So it's a different format. We think that this is the best way to provide this information. But with every school providing information in a different way, it can be kind of confusing to compare, like, okay, they called it this and they called it this, and it's in a different order. So the college financing plan, I'll go back, is that kind of unified apples to apples comparison where you should be able to get a clearer sense of, one school versus another when you look at your college financing plans side by side. So I recommend that you look at both formats of the aid offer information so that you can really fully understand and compare to all the schools you're thinking about attending. Okay, so here's the overview, and let's start to drill down. So at the top, you're seeing the total cost of attendance information from the college financing plan. And at the bottom, you're seeing that same information or same categories of information, but from the University of Oregon aid offer letter, just to compare the two, right? So the first thing, I'm just going to go through line by line and tell you like what we include in our cost of attendance and what is likely to be included at other schools. So tuition and fees assumes a certain enrollment level. It probably assumes full-time enrollment at a place like the University of Oregon. We assume the number of credits you need to average every term to graduate within 4 years. It includes all the standard fees and things like that. These are things that appear on your bill, right? At the University of Oregon, we bill you term by term. So this amount is showing you the amount for the full year, but what you can expect to see on your bill in the fall would be a third of that because we're on the quarter system. We have the fall, the winter, and the spring terms in the regular academic year, and then we have a summer term that's optional. This is for fall, winter, and spring that you're going to see on your aid offer. Food and housing is our most common price point, and every school is going to determine what they want to provide to you as the estimate of food and housing. But your costs may be higher or lower than what you see in your estimated cost of attendance. It's just an estimate. It's based on information that you provided to us on your admissions application and your FAFSA. So for example, if you're a first-year student at the University of Oregon, we have a first-year live-on requirement. So all students have to either live on campus or submit an appeal saying, hey, I live in Springfield. I'm going to live at home to save some money. And those are approved, by the way. If you live in Springfield, you live close enough, you don't really have to fight for it. But there are lots of advantages to living on campus. It really can make the transition to college easier if you can afford it. So anyway, tuition and fees, food and housing, these are things that we include on your bill at the University of Oregon. Another thing I want to point out that you see in the college financing plan version is the off-campus residence. So let's say you're in year 2 at the University of Oregon. We're going to show you estimated costs for rent and meals in Eugene for your fall, winter, and spring. And it's not something we actually charge you for, right? But we're giving you a sense of what costs to expect. And importantly, financial aid can cover all these things. And when I use the word financial aid, I do include loans. There's not that many students who can cover the full amount of the cost of attendance with grants and scholarships. So usually it's with a combination of types of financial aid. But if you include all that aid, it can cover your total cost of attendance. You can see estimated books and supplies, personal expenses, transportation. These things are going to vary depending on your choices. Do you rent your books instead of buying them? Maybe you've already got savings for personal expenses. Transportation, maybe you take the bus. The bus is free if you're a University of Oregon student. You might not actually need to pay $366 for gas over the course of the year if you're just going home to Springfield. But it's just to give you a sense of, for students like you, what are the standard costs? I think that does it for this page. I'm going to jump back over to you all and see if there's any questions about cost of attendance.
Nick, I have a question. With everything that's going on in our world right now, is there any change in the cost of attendance just with the pandemic that students can anticipate for next year?
So Jessica, do you mean like tuition reductions or?
Yeah, like tuition reductions, or are you seeing reductions in maybe books and supplies because things are being provided online? I'm just asking the question just because I know a lot has shifted from in person to online. I don't know if you've even thought about fall yet. I know obviously that's a long ways away, and we all hope to be in person. But I was just wondering if that's something that has shifted at all, and that could possibly shift.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to release our cost of attendance for this coming year in a couple of weeks when we create our 8 offers. And don't quote me on this, but I think I saw a preview of it, and that some of the costs did go down. I think rent costs might have gone down by just a little bit. Books may have gone down just a little bit. And yeah, it's for those reasons. We do a survey each year of what are the typical costs that students are paying. And it can vary based on these kinds of things, the economy to some extent. But I would say for cost of attendance, don't expect too many things to go down. um, Tuition and fees is one of those line items that almost always goes up. There's some schools that say we're not going to increase tuition and fees for X amount of years or something like that. The University of Oregon, the way we handle it is we have what's called guaranteed tuition. So it's called the Oregon Guarantee. That's the official name of it. So when you start at the University of Oregon, the tuition rate and all of the administrative fees that you see in your financial aid offer are never going to go up while you're a student at the University of Oregon. So whatever is the rate that you're paying in your first term of your freshman year, it never goes up after that, right? But for the students who start the following year, it's going to be a little bit higher, and they're going to be locked into that little bit higher rate. So we just revise it for each incoming class, rather than you're already a student here, you're going into year 2, and suddenly you're getting bills that are higher than you paid in year 1, right? So we like to give you that certainty, but different schools are going to handle it in different ways. You might want to ask them how they handle tuition increases.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, Nick, because if there are students that are considering taking a year off, um, but because they feel like maybe they're not going to get the same experience, or they want to save money, potentially they would be paying more money than if the tuition goes up, is what I think I'm hearing you say. So I feel like that's a really good point for our students to understand that.
Yeah, it could cost more in a subsequent year, although just in my opinion, there are kind of other more important things to think about, such as if you are offered a scholarship this year. Let's say I'm going to talk about some specific scholarships at the University of Oregon, like Apex or Pathway Oregon. These are scholarships you can only get as a first-time freshman, and you have to enroll within 2 years after you graduate from high school. So if you were to take 12 credits at Lane Community College next year or more, instead of attending the University of Oregon, then by the time you transfer to the U of O, you won't be able to get those scholarships. They're only for first-time freshmen. So very important to know whether the scholarships you are being offered now are dependent upon you enrolling, straight from high school. One point of clarification there. At the University of Oregon, you can take 1 year off. So if you don't attend anywhere else in that year off, that's okay. But if you go somewhere else, you're not a first-time freshman anymore. The other thing I would just think about is your level of preparedness. Do you feel ready for college, or is there some other reason why you should take the time off? I can speak for us. We're planning to have a mostly in-person experience in the fall. We just got word that in Oregon there should be vaccines for instructors and staff members by the end of May, and maybe potentially for everyone. So we're really optimistic that fall will be a regular in-person experience, and hopefully that's less of a consideration than it was for students who had to start this year, which was a really challenging year to start college. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Expected family contribution. Okay, so you can see in the top, expected family contribution, And it says, based on FAFSA, as calculated by the institution using information reported on the FAFSA or to your institution. And then says, based on institutional methodology used by most private institutions in addition to FAFSA. We're not a private institution, so when you look at the version below, we don't provide all of this kind of extra text. But basically, private schools have the ability to use the information on your FAFSA in a different way to estimate what it is you might be able to pay. Some of them require an additional financial aid application that's called the CSS profile. So it asks a lot more kind of detailed questions about your financial need, your family assets, and things like that. So for the most part, you're just going to see, if you've applied to private or public schools, you're just going to see the expected family contribution. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, the FAFSA asks a lot of questions, as you probably know, about your family's income from a couple of years ago, your income if you were working, how many people are in college in the coming year, how many people are in the family, what state do you live in, and it does a calculation, and it says, okay, rent is on average this in your state, and food is this on average, and medical on average, and this is what we think the family might have as discretionary spending money. And that is your estimated expected family contribution. So it's really a rough number. Lots of families look at that expected family contribution, they go, oh my gosh, we do not have that much money. And there might be two reasons why. Either, the formula is just kind of rough and there's some things that the FAFSA doesn't take into account, or the information that it asks for no longer represents your ability to pay. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So the other thing to know about expected family contribution is that despite its name, it's not actually what you're going to see that you owe on your bill. So it's really just to be used as an approximate, like a relative level of financial need compared to all the other families who have submitted a FAFSA. An expected family contribution of about $5,800 or less is considered very high need. And that is probably going to qualify you for some additional need-based grants and scholarships. It certainly does at the University of Oregon. Okay, so there's all this information in the text here, kind of about what it is you're about to read in your financial aid offer. This is assuming you live on campus, you're a full-time dependent student in your freshman year, yada, yada, yada. We're going to use that expected family contribution to determine what level of, what amounts and types of financial aid we can offer you. So there's a direct correlation between your EFC, expected family contribution, and what is in your aid offer. Any questions about the expected family contribution or the information on this page? All right. Oh, there's the key information, expected family contribution. Okay. Now, let's look at scholarships and grants. This is like very exciting stuff. This is free money. This is like what's going to make the dream happen. Hopefully you're seeing some scholarships and grants in your aid offer. There are two main types of scholarships and grants. There are those that are based on financial need, and there are those that are based on academic merit or some kind of achievement. And the word scholarship and grant, those can kind of be interchangeable in terms of free money, but basically most scholarships are a little bit more exclusive, so to speak. Less students qualify. They might, for scholarships, you might have submitted an additional application in order to get one of those. Grants are more like everybody who meets a certain threshold gets this one, and they're more likely to be from the state or from the federal government. So anyhow, let's go line by line. Scholarship and grant options. These are gift aid. No repayment is needed. So if we look in the scholarship section, this aid offer actually breaks it down for you. Merit-based scholarships from your school, from your state, other scholarships. If you've got some from an outside agency, like, maybe you've been talking with Jessica, or maybe you've been talking with an organization in the community, you did an application, you submitted an essay to their Rotary Club, or maybe your school has some kind of scholarship. We won't be able to include those unless you report them to us. But other schools probably would include it in that other scholarship section once you've reported it to them. Total scholarships. Then over there on the right side, grants. The federal Pell Grant is kind of a big one. It's up to $6,800 or so per year. And that's one that you would get if you have, again, below that certain expected family contribution. Institutional grants, state grants, if you submitted your FAFSA on time, then you also are going to be considered for the Oregon Opportunity Grant. And if you have high financial need, you might see that as well. So that's kind of the way that the college financing plan lays it out. Now I want to get really specific with the University of Oregon information, because you have an example here in the APEX scholarship of a merit-based scholarship. So this year, every student who had a 3.7 or higher GPA, as determined by our Office of Admissions, and we do weight GPAs based on what courses you took in your grades, every student who had a 3.7 or higher is offered that APEX scholarship. So that's a merit-based scholarship. It doesn't depend on your financial need. And there's certain requirements to that scholarship. This $1,000 showing here per term is dependent upon you being a full-time student. And you'll get it every year as long as you continue to meet certain eligibility requirements, like you maintain a 3.0. So especially with merit scholarships, it's really important to look at the terms and conditions of those scholarships. It's probably provided to you when you were first notified of that scholarship. What do you have to do in order to get that money to pay onto your account? I also want to talk about Pathway Oregon, which is a special program at the University of Oregon. If you have a 3.4 high school GPA, you're eligible for the federal Pell Grant as determined by your FAFSA, you're coming in as a first-time freshman, then your tuition and fees are going to be paid for at the University of Oregon. We're going to take your Pell Grant in this case, and your Pathway Oregon, and your APEX, and actually everything comes together, and it's going to equal your tuition and fees. So as long as you continue to do well in your classes, you continue to qualify for the federal Pell Grant in subsequent years, you never have to worry about you getting your tuition and fees covered. If you've applied to the University of Oregon, we're going to let you know in just the next couple of weeks whether you qualify for Pathway Oregon or not. But it's a little confusing the way it's laid out here. Pathway Oregon grant, 12 credits. Pathway Oregon grant, over 12 credits. What does that mean? I mentioned to you previously that tuition and fees, as we calculated it in your cost of attendance, was based on 15 credits per term, the number required to graduate on time. So this aid offer assumes 15 credits per term, and Pathway Oregon it requires 12 credits, and then it's showing you how much more it's going to pay if you take 15 credits per term, but that amount will go up or down depending on the number of credits you actually take, because it's a guarantee that your tuition and fees are covered. So we're kind of getting in the weeds, but you're getting the sense that there are requirements to what you see offered to you here, and it's really important to understand how each type of financial aid works, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you take 9 credits instead of the 12 that are required for Pathway Oregon, and all of a sudden you don't have your tuition and fees covered, right? Your aid offer is going to look different than this one. It's going to be unique to your situation. So it's so important that you ask for assistance if you don't know what the requirements are for all the different types of financial aid. All right, I'm going to hop back in to look at the chat and give you a chance to ask any questions about scholarships and grants.
Vic, you may have covered this. There's just so much it may not have sunken in yet. With APEX pathways, if your GPA drops, do those go away?
For example, if you have a rough winter or spring term, Our Office of Admissions looks for general academic success in the winter and spring term. They don't publish what exactly they're looking for, but basically something consistent with how you've been doing as a student prior to that time. So I'm glad you asked that. It's important to know that you might get senioritis, especially this has been an exhausting year, right, for everybody with online learning and all of the stress of the pandemic and fires and all the stuff that's happened this year. But you cannot bank on your financial aid offer until that money is in your account, right? You need to continue to meet the standards for which the school expects of you.
I think on the flip side too, that could be in your benefit. I know when my son was applying, he's a U of O junior now, and I can't remember which scholarships, he has the Apex, but I can't remember which one was the one he was receiving in his letter, and he was about 1/10 away from receiving the Apex. So in his letter, he actually didn't have Apex, but because you have to send your official transcript after you graduation, the U of O actually adjusted that because he did bring his GPA up and has been receiving that award, which is something for you guys to all know. I don't know, Nick, if they still do that. Again, this was a few years ago, but in his situation, that worked to his benefit.
That's great. For the most part, the scholarships that are in the aid offers we're going to send out in a couple weeks are going to be final for the most part. We asked folks to submit their self-reported grades and course information by February 15th, and that's the information we use to determine what you can qualify for. However, in some situations, where not enough students have committed to fill our freshman class or something, we might upgrade. Scholarship process changes from year to year. So, for example, this year we didn't require test scores for any of our scholarships, and that may or may not be the case for students who are starting in fall 2022. So it can kind of vary from year to year. I would just say, continue to do your best. And especially, there might be some private scholarships you're applying to that want to see your final transcript, and they'll use that GPA. There's a lot of reasons to continue to do well, even when you're exhausted and nearing the end of your high school career. Okay. Let's talk about net cost. So, in the college financing plan version, I think they use a little bit clearer language here. College costs you will be required to pay, right? That's what net cost is. So just to give you some kind of financial terms, the gross cost would be the total. And then you subtract the grants and scholarships that you're getting, free money, and then you get the net cost. So that's what's left over, right? It's kind of the bottom line. And so that is a number that I really encourage you to hone in on in every offer letter you're looking at. Look at the net cost at one school versus the other, not the total cost of attendance, right? So let me give you an example. Lewis and Clark costs like 2 to 3 times as much in their cost of attendance as the University of Oregon. They have a really, really high tuition rate because they're a private school. And the way they operate is that they offer lots of students scholarships to reduce that cost. And that the amount that they're going to offer is going to vary from student to student. So that's why you look at your aid offer and then you go, okay, well, what is it I actually have to pay, right? So Lewis and Clark might offer a $30,000 scholarship to bring their cost of attendance closer to what the University of Oregon is publishing and only offering a $6,000 scholarship for. So don't count yourself out based on the sticker price, the published price. You really want to look at this net cost information. What does it actually cost me to go here? And again, it could vary depending on how many credits you take or what residence hall you live in, these kinds of things, but you can really compare more easily with this figure. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide here, which we're talking about now, ways to pay that net cost. So you're saying, okay, I see what grants and scholarships I was initially offered, but there's still a net cost, and I don't have a lot of money to pay that. I don't have $15,000, right, over the course of the year to pay for college. Like, that's a lot of money. So how do we take care of that? Okay, so one way you can do it is with loans. In this first aid offer letter from the the college financing plan, you can see that there's a number of different types of loans here. Federal direct subsidized loan, federal direct unsubsidized loan, private loans, institutional loans, and other aid that must be repaid. I don't know what that might be, but some schools might offer that sort of thing. This really kind of like underlines the fact that loans are money, it's self-help aid. It's money that you borrow that you then need to pay back, usually with interest, which means that you're paying back more than you initially borrowed, and the longer it takes you to pay it back, the more you have to pay back. Now, I think it's really helpful here that in the college financing plan, it's actually going to show you the interest rate, so you can more easily compare these types of loans on their interest rate. But there's still some details that aren't really here. For example, what is a subsidized loan versus an unsubsidized loan? And I'll tell you, in this case, a subsidized loan it has a subsidy. And a subsidy is when like a government or somebody is like making a payment to make something cost less. So a subsidized loan is a need-based loan that does not accrue interest while you're enrolled in school and during the 6 months after you graduate, which is called your grace period. So that's a really good loan, right? It's not going to accrue interest while you're in school. It's going to cost less to pay off. Now that's the first one to take. If you need more, you would take the unsubsidized loan and things like that. These federal loans, they don't require a credit check. They don't require a separate application. They'll just be offered to you, and then you can choose to accept them. And if you accept them, you might have to do like a legal document saying, hey, I promise to pay this loan back, and all the details about how it works. But that's the great thing about these federal loans is they have low fixed interest rates. The interest rate's not going to go up and you're suddenly going to be paying crazy interest. They have low fees. They are super easy to pay back. By that I mean there's a lot. If you like have a financial crisis, then they're going to work with you to like be like, well, what can you pay? So these are things to think about with loans. I know like this is probably the first loan that all of you are even thinking about, right? Just note, take the federal loans first before you think about a private loan, and take your subsidized and unsubsidized federal loans before your parent looks at a parent loan. Now you can see at the bottom there, the Federal Direct Parent Plus loan. It's really intended to be a supplemental loan for a parent of a dependent student. A dependent student is like, you just came from high school, you're not married, you don't have kids, you're not in graduate school, you're a dependent student. So a parent can borrow this Parent Plus federal loan to assist you, or they could borrow a private loan. A private loan is like from a bank or other lender. That might be what most people think of, like, oh, I want a loan, I go to the bank. That is an option as well. But parents just want to like compare those loans and be like, okay, do I like the interest rate and fee on this one better or on this one? So parents have it's less clear which loan they should take first. For students, you take the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans first, and maybe anything that's being offered from the school if they offer that, like an institutional loan. Okay. Let's also talk about work study. So this is another way to pay net cost, is to work on campus or near campus. Work study is a type of financial aid. So not everybody is going to have work study. At the University of Oregon, we offer it to students who had their FAFSA in before the priority filing deadline, March 1st, and are eligible for the federal Pell Grant, right? Again, that's based on your expected family contribution. So tying it all together, work study makes it easier to find a job on campus because the federal government pays part of your paycheck. So there's plenty of places on campus that could not afford to pay students, to offer jobs, but because they have federal work study funding, they can offer jobs, and they're only available to students who've got this in their financial aid offer. Now, there's other jobs on and near campus that don't require work study. So just know that if you use the term work study, it's a type of financial aid that you see in your aid offer and you earn by getting a job, applying for a job, working hours, and getting a paycheck. So it's different from all your other types of financial aid that are actually going towards your bill. This money is really intended to be used for your books or your living expenses more than anything else. A couple other good things about work study. You're a student first. They can never schedule you for work hours during your exams or during your class time. And there's much more of like a intention amongst the supervisors to help it be part of your student experience, help you learn, how to, professional expectations and how to write a resume and how to, you're gaining job skills, which then you can integrate with your coursework and you can get a job after college. It's part of your experience. So you can see here, it's a little bit kind of unclear out of context. It says 500, 500, 500, 1,500. So that's like per term. At the University of Oregon, you can actually earn any amount in any term, but it might be different at different schools. So that's just a way to earn some of your financial aid and help you pay that net cost. Okay, and then just kind of looking at, kind of summing it all up, right? We looked at the estimated cost of attendance. And now here is the grants and scholarships, net cost, work study, and loans. This is everything we already looked at, but side by side. And the key thing to look at here is that the total cost of attendance is equal to the total financial aid offer. So on the one hand, that's exciting, right? You can say, okay, I know that I can afford to go to this school. But it's a little bit misleading too, because look at the very bottom right. The Parent Plus loan, right, is $8,468, and that requires a credit check. So if your parent doesn't pass the credit check, you kind of cross out that source of financial aid. That's not available. Suddenly, your total cost of attendance is not covered, right? So just be wary when you look at the aid offer, like how much of this is a loan? Does that loan require a credit check? And also, am I comfortable taking out this loan amount? The loan amounts in this aid offer are pretty reasonable. I would say as aid offers go. If you're looking at a school out of state, you're probably going to see a higher loan amount unless you have a really, really good scholarship. But when we look at the bottom line here, your cost of attendance minus your gift aid, that's your grants and scholarships, equals your net cost. And then if you take that net cost and you cover it with work study and loans, your cost of attendance can be covered. Any questions now that we're kind of at the end of this section on the details of the financial aid offer? I know I gave you so much information. What's sticking out? What still doesn't make sense? I explained it all. Okay, cool. A couple more things, and then I'll be done providing this info to you, and then I just want to hear kind of any question you have about college. So start to think about whatever question you might have about college. Okay. So you might want additional grants and scholarships to help you with that net cost. I mentioned, the FAFSA asks for information that's a little bit old by the time you start school. In this case, for this year, it asks for 2019 financial information. This has been a really unique and difficult year for a lot of families, 2020 and 2021. So schools can potentially use updated information to update your FAFSA. And at the University of Oregon, we would especially do that if it switches you from not being eligible for the Pell Grant to being eligible for the Pell Grant. That could be the difference between not being eligible for Pathway Oregon and being eligible for Pathway Oregon and getting your tuition and fees covered, right? That could be a big deal. So if you've had a change in financial circumstance, in income, not expenses, but income, then contact the school and we can consider an update. There are also places to look for additional scholarships. So contact the college or university that you're interested in going to. Look on their financial aid website. We have a list of all types of scholarships available at the University of Oregon on our financial aid website. Check it out. There's also private scholarship lists at some colleges and universities. We've got one called a scholarship bulletin board. It's a virtual bulletin board. So whenever a private organization says, hey, we have this scholarship and we want to offer it to your students, we make sure that it's a good one, that it's for real. And then we post it there, and you can kind of just go through and say, okay, what might be available? I mentioned scholarships in your community. There's also scholarship searches online. So you could go to scholarships.com, or you could do a search engine search for big future scholarships. There's all kinds of like online opportunities. And these are the ones I'm showing now because at the University of Oregon, a lot of our scholarship deadlines have passed. So at this point, really, you're going to want to focus your efforts on private scholarships. And then you can, once you enroll, you could apply for scholarships for next year. But definitely check on what those deadlines are. This is a really key time of year to be applying for scholarships for this coming fall. All right, lastly, next steps. Let's get your ducks in a row. So check your email daily. That's where a lot of financial aid offices send important things you need to attend to. Visit your student records portal and check out if there's any requirements you need to complete to finalize your aid offer. We talked about all those things in your offer, but that might change if you made an error on your FAFSA. You clarify with the financial aid office, they might have to make a change. It could benefit you. It could mean more or better aid. It could mean worse or less aid, but you don't know until you complete the requirements. So do that as quickly as possible. Discuss your offer letter with your family. This is like a really important decision on a financial aspect. And can they pay anything? Are you on your own? Are you expected to work? These are really important questions. And then you can accept or decline that offer. Now here's something. This is the aid process as you go into year 2 and beyond. So it's similar, a little bit different. So FAFSA becomes available in October. You're doing your requirements. We create the aid offers for continuing students a little bit later because we want to get it to first-year students first so you can make that decision about where you want to go. Then we wait to see how students have done in their academic year. Do you have good grades and all this stuff before we can determine what we can offer you for the next year. And then September to March, that is the time to apply for scholarships for the next academic year. Okay, lastly, I said this before, I want to say it again. Ask for help. Do not be shy. If you talk with somebody that you didn't like talking to, ask for somebody else next time. You are your own best advocate, and most of the staff at any school are there really to help you understand what's going on. And there's so many students that it's kind of hard to know, who doesn't understand what unless you let us know. So this is the University of Oregon contact info. Best way to get some help is to give us a call, and we are happy to help you. Even if you aren't coming to the University of Oregon, we can help you wherever you'd like to go. Those are all the slides. So we've got, I think we have 5 minutes. Is that, still have 5 minutes? Okay. Open floor. So we've got a number of students here. I want to know your questions about financial aid, your questions about college. What do I need to be doing during the summer? What's it like living on campus? How exactly do I get a job? I'm going to leave it to you. Go ahead and unmute if there's something on your mind. I'm okay with awkward silences. I'm just going to wait until somebody asks a question because I know you have them. Okay, Jack has a question. If income varies drastically year to year, my dad is a small business owner and our income can take huge dips depending on the real estate market. Would that qualify as special circumstances? Yes, it would. So, Jack, it kind of depends on what year you want us to look at. Like if we look at 2020, your family can do or maybe has done taxes for 2020 already. And so we can say, okay, we know for sure that 2020 was less than 2019, less income, and we could make that update. At the University of Oregon, we're willing to consider updates to the FAFSA based on the current year as well, but those are just estimates. So we wait until July and you provide some information about income so far this year, and then you make some educated guesses about what the remainder of the year is going to look like. But for somebody who's in real estate, we might not do that, because the second part of the year could look really different from the first part. We might wait until that year is done before we can make really an educated guess and make an update to your FAFSA. So bottom line is that, yes, we can make an update for income as it changes. You might want to start by comparing 2020 income information to 2019 income information with your family and determine whether that's lower. And if so, contact the financial aid office at the schools you're interested in. And it would be a separate process at each school to update the FAFSA. Do not make the changes at fafsa.gov. Other questions?
So I just want to make sure, if we get a scholarship or something like that, will they just email us, or our school will tell us? Like if we get it?
Yeah, so there's certain types of scholarships, like at the University of Oregon, if you've gotten Apex or Pathway Oregon, that's a really big deal. Like you're a top student and we want you to come here. So we're going to send you like a special email to let you know about that one scholarship, as well as the regular financial aid offer, which is what you can expect to receive from every school. And the Apex would be one of several types of financial aid in your aid offer. The aid offer for the University of Oregon is going to arrive in the mail by the end of this month, probably. So you might want to check with your school when exactly they're going to send your aid offer and whether they're going to send it by mail or electronically, so you know where to look for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe one last question.
Well, Nick, I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your day. I know how busy you are, and you've helped our students so much this year. I've sent several students your way with questions, and all of them say the same thing, just how helpful you are and how much they appreciate you. So thank you so much. This has been great. So much information. I'm sure students are just going to have to absorb it all, and maybe contacting you with follow-up questions. But I appreciate you so much taking the time out and explaining this, because it's a big topic, and it's one that, like I said, every year we get lots and lots of questions. So
yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really glad to be able to provide this info. I'm going to put in the chat a helpful link to a glossary about terms that you might see on your aid offer. So that would be a good one to bookmark for when you're looking at your aid offer, if you just want like a reminder of some things I talked about. And I'm going to put my email address here, which is ndicus@uoregon.edu. You are welcome to send me an email if you have more questions.
perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome. Okay for me to sign off then?
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day. Go out and enjoy the sunshine a little bit.
You too. All right. Thanks. Bye.